Hello, everybody. My name is Jomi, here to do a language slash speaking-ish lecture for you as one of your elective lectures. Everybody should be able to hear me. If you can't, please let me know in the chat. Okay, cool. It sounds like everybody can hear me. Let me just make sure also that you'll be able to hear audio for this. Yeah, sure, sound. There we go. Okay, cool. I made that mistake last time. I don't want to make that mistake again. Okay, so you guys should be able to see, should be able to hear, because there'll be a couple small videos we'll see in this lecture. But beyond that, everything should be good. So, unless everybody has any questions, which they should not have, let's get started on a lecture on mastering language to become the speaking master, which will just be a guide on how word choice makes for better speaking and more compelling speeches. So first, table of contents, just like what you should expect from this lecture. We'll go over 6 specific things. 1, why word choice matters. 2, the intersection of language and speaking, as in the intersection of the kind of words you are choosing and how people feel about those words and what those words are in terms of like a matrix of understanding them. 3, how to determine what is good and bad language to use in round. 4, how to improve your language in round in the short term. 5, how to improve your language in round on a long-term basis. And 6, at the end of the day, how to execute when you got the right words to use to make for more compelling arguments. Right. But of course, I never really usually do this, but apparently people told me I should do this more in terms of introducing myself. I never think I'm really that important, but I guess I gotta say it. Hi, I'm Jomi Epoyun. I did debate just like you guys for about 4 years, but didn't really feel like 4. It felt more like 3-ish. And then the last year was actually a really solid year in terms of me actually getting my full debate experience. I compete and graduated back in 2017. I now coach. I've coached publicly, but mainly private now. And I've coached for a while. But I know you guys care about relatively results and like, is this guy kind of know what he's talking about? Has his theories and wacky ideas worked in some capacity? Yes, the short answer is yes. I've had someone in a major final except Glenbrooks at some point, most recently 2024 House Finals. But at the end of the day, again, I'm just some guy with a lot of experience and interesting and kooky ideas, and I say them in interesting ways. So I like to have fun. I like to be a mad scientist and like just throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. But also I like to do it in a way that's also like methodical and like intentional. And that is the big thing that I want you guys to all take away from this at the end of the day, which is intentionality. If there's one thing you should take away from this lecture, it should be that you should be intentional about every word you are saying because it impacts the quality of your speaking and therefore the quality of your speech. You roughly have 180 seconds because there's 60 seconds in a minute. You give 3-minute speeches, that's 180 seconds to make your speech the best it can be. You should make every second count by making every word count. Cool? Any questions so far? No? Cool. So let's get started. First, why word choice matters. Well, the short answer is that your words impact speaking quality and therefore the speech quality, like I already previously said. Certain words communicate your message better than others. The genesis of this entire lecture really just came from me doing a lot of research on how to improve as a coach. I care about everybody that I coach. I care about the people, and I want to be the best I can be for them, especially because I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to make sure I can give the best experience possible. So I was always like, I'm always researching and like trying to figure out new ways and always thinking about stuff. I'm thinking about 1,000 thoughts a minute. And an epiphany came to my head when I was like, hey, your language is inexplicably connected to your speaking, and your speaking is inexplicably connected to your language, in the sense that your words are going to make a lot of times either your job of speaking harder or easier. If you're saying the right words that convey the kind of speech you're trying to give or the emotion that you're trying to give in the speech, that will make your speech that much easier for it to be compelling, and therefore a judge to buy your arguments and buy your speeches and buy your narratives more. The thing is, even though the vast majority, if not all of you, are pretty smart individuals, trust me, I've talked to probably a good amount of you. I've listened to you guys say arguments, and I'm just like, yeah, I didn't even think of that. That was kind of fire. But I think the way you are articulating these arguments is decreasing the perception of how good these arguments can be. And at the end of the day, especially in congressional debate, where you are fighting with, at bare minimum, 12 other people in terms of who has the best perception. Perception equals reality, because in this event, you are trying to be the judge, you're trying to be the person the judge perceives is the most credible and therefore is deserving of the one, while other people are jockeying for position to make you look less credible. So, and it's not necessarily about whether the argument is right or wrong, but more like whether the argument is perceived by the judge and by your fellow competitors as this argument is very compelling, we should probably deal with it. Or in the judge's case, this argument is very compelling, I believe it, I think it deserves the one, right? Therefore, this ultimately comes down to
Watch what again?
things. If you guys are, if you
What's Baby
remember, you
Driver?
guys are on mute. Put you guys on mute. I'll hear some more clip. Awesome, cool. So then this ultimately comes down to like two things if you want to truly understand what I'm saying here, and it is the difference between intelligence and eloquence. Intelligence is the knowledge communicated, aka the argument. Whereas eloquence is how persuasive the words you are using to communicate that argument sound, and therefore make the argument that much more appealing on the ear and on the mind, and also on the heart, because a lot of times feelings trump thought, especially if you push the right buttons. Now, obviously, you shouldn't probably abuse that, but like you should also use it to your advantage to make more compelling arguments, especially if you believe your argument is argumentatively really good, but you're not giving it the right way. But also, finally, your judges understand different words better than others, even if they mean the same thing. There are plenty of times that I'm sure you guys have experienced, whether you guys are from different parts of the country or you guys are from different countries in an entirety, that certain words are said in different ways and certain words communicate different things. And so therefore, your judge is not immune to that. Your judge also comes from a different locale and a different worldview and a different country and a different background, different demographics. They understand different words to mean different things and different phrases to mean different things. So you should take advantage of that and understand that and be aware of it in order for you to be able to give arguments that are that much more compelling, because it is easier, one, and two, they can easily attribute the words you are saying to the kind of conditions you are trying to explain in your speech. Any questions on that first part? No? Cool. The second thing is the intersection of language and speaking, as in understanding how certain words are perceived so you can make better word choice decisions. The four considerations on the intersection of language and choice you should consider in terms of choosing the right kind of words you should say should be on this sort of word choice matrix that I have. And it starts with common words, uncommon words, vague words, and precise words, right? Common words are the kind of words everybody says, irregardless of education and demographics. Think like, oh, someone is cool, someone is nice, someone is chill, right? Versus uncommon words, which are the kind of words that everyone may not know. However, when said, they can convey expertise depending on certain demographics and certain topic understandings, right? Versus vague and precise words, Vague just conveys the picture that is very easy to understand, but could be misunderstood as something else, or could be easily misconstrued or misdirected, or if you're in a round, someone else can mischaracterize or properly, intentionally recharacterize what you said as meaning something else rather than what you think you said it to be. Versus precise words, which convey a more detailed picture that can be harder to understand immediately, but when understood, paints a picture that is very hard to be misunderstood or be recharacterized or recontextualized by someone else in a position to try to recharacterize your speech in a
I have a
negative
question.
way. Go ahead. Any questions?
Yeah, so should you use certain words for questioning rather than your speeches? Like, should you use precise words for questioning or uncommon words?
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but to answer the question in a very short way, it depends on the kind of question and depends on the round demographics and characteristics. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, and that'll probably answer your question a lot better. But the short answer is it depends on a lot of factors that you need to consider first, right? So here's a short video to explain a little bit of this as well. It's only like a minute long, don't worry. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear it.
What do we mean when we say articulate? If we chart a graph with a common to uncommon axis and a precise to vague axis, articulate speakers will frequently employ words that fall into this realm. These are precise words that most people recognize but don't use. Words such as favorable, curtail, or nefarious. If I were to ask you to describe a friend's attitude, you might say he's nice, which is a rather common and vague description.
Do you see how the word nice, it's decently common, but it's kind of vague. I'm sure you've asked the question before if someone said, like with your friends, like, oh, if this is this one person cool? Who is this one person? Like, what are they like? And then your friend says, oh, they're cool. What do you mean by cool? Like, are they cool enough to where we can hang out with them? Are they cool enough to where they're not going to reveal secrets? Are they cool enough to where I can know that they are not going to be my ops in the next like month or two? Cool. And words like that are relatively more vague can leave a lot to be desired at times, but that does not mean you should not use them, because there may be times where you just need to be relatively vague and then parts of your speech fill in that vagueness later on in the speech or earlier in the speech. It just depends. Let's continue.
You could say he's enthusiastic, which is certainly less common and more precise. You could also say he's rhapsodic, which is even more defined, but a word so uncommon, people will scarcely know the meaning. This is why we don't progress past this line. Otherwise, we risk employing words that sound too scholarly and sophisticated and confuse our listener. Articulate.
I'm sure you guys have, a good amount of you guys have experienced that before, where you've tried to use a very complicated word. You didn't really know the context of the word, and therefore when you then said it, your judge didn't understand how you were saying it, especially and how you're saying it, what you were saying, what the context of that word was to say, a lot of other things. But let's back it up just let's go back right quick.
What do we mean when we say articulate? If we chart, this is why we don't progress past this line. Otherwise, we risk employing words that sound too scholarly and sophisticated and confuse our listener. Articulacy is about making yourself understood in detail.
Right? At the end of the day, being an articulate and compelling speaker is about saying things in ways that are articulate and compelling, right? Hopefully that video helped.
What do we mean when we...
Nope. There we go. Now, number 3. Al, any questions before we continue on? No? Cool. 3. How to determine what is good and bad language to use in round. Sneak peek is all about understanding points of view. Now, you understand the matrix that you should be considering the kind of words you're using in your speech. You have, it's a matrix of common to uncommon on the x-axis versus vague to precise on a y-axis. And words fall on that sliding scale and range, right? So then how do you determine what kind of word to use at the right time, right? How do I determine I should be more vague and common, or how do I determine I should be a little bit more uncommon and precise? How do I make sure I'm not too uncommon? How do I make sure I'm not too common? How do I make sure I'm not too vague? How do I make sure I'm not too precise to where I'm losing my judge? This comes down to the idea of points of view, right? So points of view as in how much do you know and how much do they know, they as the judge. So POV of you as the expert and communicator. You are the expert. You are the one giving the speech. You are the one that is educating the judge, right? So you need to treat yourself as the expert in that sense. Therefore, from your point of view as the communicator, you need to understand, one, what words you are already comfortable with, right? What words are you already really good at using? You have a really good understanding of that word, not just from a pure definition point of view, but also from a contextual, colloquial, lexicon point of view, meaning you know how to use it in everyday language. You could use it and your mom would understand how you're using it, right? Even if she's never really used the word before, right? Understanding the words you already have in your toolkit makes yourself a lot easier because you should be sticking to what you already are really good at, right? And the words, whether common, uncommon, vague, or precise, you already have in your toolkit at the time of the round, right? Second, understand the topic with depth, aka prep, but prep with round vision, as in the sense, prep with a broader view of the legislation. Do not just prep like, oh, I got this crazy good argument. I'm gonna just prep that till the cows come home and just be done with it. No, prep as in, okay, what is this argument? What is the larger context of the region if you're discussing a FOPO bill? What is the larger context of the healthcare industry if you're discussing a domestic healthcare piece of legislation? How would people respond to this argument? How would people respond to that argument? What are the kind of arguments that are stock? What are the kind of arguments that the app will try to say? What is the app trying to get across here? What would the next big issues be? Understanding the topic with that kind of vision and depth will then make it far easier for you to be able to have compelling language that sounds that much more detailed, but also does not sound out the realm of possibility of a vast plurality of judges to be able to understand that. Third, understand the narratives and world building and emotions you want the audience to understand and take from the speech. Understand if your judge could only reduce your speech down to one sentence, one or two sentences, what is that sentence you want them to take away from? How should they feel about your speech? Should they feel angry? Should they feel sad? Should they feel enthusiastic that this bill actually does something? Should they be really concerned that this bill has such an adverse reaction to the status quo? What is the world that your legislation your argument creates? What is the world that you're trying to look like? Yeah, yes, I will share the slides later. Don't worry. I will share them in the classroom. Don't worry. What is the world that your arguments are trying to describe? If you have a better and more vivid understanding of that in your head, it will then be a lot easier for you to then put that on paper, right? But I feel a lot of times competitors have this argument and just have the argument just right then and there, but they don't really have the argument, but they don't really understand the worldview or the world building that you're trying to have, or the narratives or the stories you're trying to communicate with that argument. Sometimes you should treat your arguments as, in the sense, you should treat them like you are building this like epic, or like you're building this epic story and you're trying to world build like what the world post the legislation's enactment, whether you're saying it as a good way or a bad way, looks like. What do people have to do now? What are their jobs look like? What do they have any jobs? What are the conditions of the cities that they live in? Does their life quality increase or decrease? Right? Understanding the emotion that you want to deliver on the speech and the world in which you're trying to say is good or bad in the speech makes your ability to be able to then choose the right words to communicate that a lot easier. Now, that is from your perspective. Now, from the perspective of the judge, how should you then, how will this help you choose the right kind of words versus not choosing the wrong kind of words? Well, understand who your judges are as much as possible. Basically, like for all my people who like to look at look at like LinkedIn profiles if they can't find that a judge has a tab room paradigm, like that's an easy way to do that. But I would say the main way is tab room paradigms. More and more judges every year are increasingly having paradigms, even if the paradigms are 2 to 3 sentences long or like just 1 sentence long. That tells you a lot about a judge and their expertise. So therefore, that will give you a lot of insight into what kind of words on the word choice matrix you should be choosing. Second, understand the broader context of the round's importance you are in. As in, understand, are you in a prelim? Are you in a quarter? Are you in a final round? Is this a local final? Is this a national final? Is this in the middle? Is this a major final? Is this your first major final? Is this an elimination round that is quite chill competitively, like you don't really have to worry too much about it? Is this a round that is quite competitive even for an elimination round? Right? Understanding the broader context of the round and its importance can definitely impact your decision making in terms of how should I use my words to be able to stand out in this round? What kind of words should I be choosing to stand out in this round? Understand the people you are surrounded with, who you're competing with. What are their styles? What are their tendencies? And then how do I differentiate myself beyond that? Third and finally is understand the physical environment and time of day you are in. This is a very slept on understanding. Are you in a regular classroom? Are you in the kind of halls we were in at Nats where the rooms were big? They were like conference rooms where they're like very big. And so therefore you have to project a lot more. Is this a morning round where like it's 7 o'clock in the morning and judges are still probably waking up? Is this a relatively afternoon evening round where the judges are now warmed up, they're fresher, they're more locked in? Is this a round again of higher importance? Is the room just cold? Like that doesn't really matter that much. But the point is that understand the physical environment you are in, and when you are giving this speech, that could play a big factor, especially if judges are getting tired, they're getting sleepy, and things like that. Right? Also, just look at your judges. You can honestly look at your judge and like make a guesstimation on what this judge may look like or where they might come from or whether they even care or not, and then make a decision choice on your words from there. Any questions? No? Well, great, because it's drill time. So I have proposed a scenario for you, and I want to get a few brave souls to give me their take in terms of how they should approach their word choice in this round. Right? In this scenario, right? So, scenario of a round you are in, what kind of language is best case here in your eyes? There are no wrong answers, but just give it a crack. You are in a semifinal round at Harvard. It's a pretty competitive round. So the round has a packed audience and your judges are mostly parents. But no one has gotten really in depth on this pre-K bill you guys are debating. You have to give the late round speech. What kind of words do you choose? Okay? If you want to talk and like actually like say something like on the mic, go ahead. If you want to just say in the chat, that's also fine as well.
I'd say precise.
Precise? Why is that? Precise, only precise, or precise and common? It's just only one drill, CJ. Don't worry. It's just only one. It's more like an interactive like drill, not really anything too complicated. Yeah. Precise and common, or precise and more uncommon?
I would say precise and common because
Why is that?
precise because your judges are parents, so you don't want to do anything like too uncommon in terms of language, but you also need to go in depth, so you want to use precise language.
Yeah, great. Anything else? Yeah, you guys are saying some good stuff here. Yeah. Oh, so it seems that this is leaning on either precise and common, but also I think there's a consensus on common, but there seems to be some slight disagreement on whether it should be super precise or just generally just kind of precise. We'll also appeal to the fact that there's a preview of our parents. Yeah, Angela, very, very good. David, you sent that as a direct message. I don't know if you meant to send that as a direct message, but yeah, you're great. Yeah, more common language. So yeah, agree, more common language, but I also agree with the idea that it should be precise, because if no one in the round has gotten really in depth on like what the impacts of the bill are, or have really gotten in depth on the sort of implications of what the bill is like trying to do, whether on the app or on the neg, this is a great opportunity to distinguish yourself by being that much more in depth, that much more precise, while also still keeping the language in a way that most people would understand. You can be precise in terms of saying exactly what you want to say, but you don't have to be too uncommon to where it's sort of doctrinal, academic, super academic language that people struggle with, or people probably just haven't heard of. Again, it's about balance. I struggled with this balance sometimes as well. I've gotten this from plenty of my people that I coach, where I'm like Jomi, you're being too intelligent at times. Like, relax a little bit. And I'm like, I had to learn. I'm like, yeah, you got a point. I have to learn. I have to be better. And then there are times where I feel like I'm dumbing it down a little too much, and then you got to learn from there. But I think that's the benefit of all this, is that you're learning trial by fire to be more precise in these kind of ways and achieve that kind of balance. Okay, but great. I love the participation. Thank you so much, guys. Let's continue. So now we understand, hey, okay, what is the value of our word choice? How we should be thinking about our word choice? What is the POV we should be looking for in our word choice? We have that down pat now. Now the next thing is, how do we improve it? As in, now that we have an understanding, but say we're outside of round, how do we improve that? Well, let's say in the short term, like right before a tournament or even within rounds, what are the things you should try to give you an edge? Well, it's all about not sounding like everyone in the round. Just like how most debaters will say things like, at the end of the day. Every congressional debater has said that at some point, and is saying that, and most congressional debaters are saying that pretty consistently. You want to avoid, yes, let me be the first person in the round. Please, my goodness. Especially when most of you guys are not the first person to say whatever you're trying to say in the round. Like, you're probably not. So it's all about not sounding like everyone else in the round. Now, how do you do that in the short term? Well, there are 3 elements I think that will lead to short-term success. Avoid things like dead phrases. What are dead phrases? Dead phrases are terminology and phrases so overused they lack much unique quality of thought, right? Meaning you're not putting any thought to your words. You're not thinking about what you're saying. There's not much quality of thought, and therefore tend to be less persuasive, less compelling. Remember, we want our arguments to be compelling. This does not mean you don't use them at all, but if you want to stand out as if you want to stand out and look more, you don't want to use the same language everybody has already said in the round or are said so much in everyday life, because like there are phrases that people say in everyday life, like for instance, like across the board, in my opinion, let's take it to the next level, spill the beans, the ins and outs, for all intents and purposes. I even say it, for all intents and purposes a lot. These are low-hanging fruit kind of phrases and words. We want to sound more distinctive, more unique, right? So you don't want to use these kind of phrases where they're used so much it sounds too cliche, right? Next, synonyms are your savior. Find alternatives to dead phrases that are still common enough that a wide variety of people will understand, but add a bit more precision because they use specific language, right? If you want, like for instance, if we want to take what Angela said in the chat and say, let me be the first person in this round, you could probably instead say, I want to be the first to introduce a very important idea in this round. Or you could say, let me try to be the first to give you a refreshing take that no one has really talked about so far, right? It has generally the same meaning as let me be the first person in this round, but it puts a different spin on it. It puts a little bit more emotion and thought to it. It uses a little bit more precise language, but the phrase is still relatively common in meaning that your judges will get it for the most part, right? So think about synonyms to words that people say in Congress all the time, or go on the internet and use the internet to your advantage to find these kind of synonyms, and then implement them in your own unique language, implement them in your own unique lexicon to sound different. Third and finally, I've already talked about this before, but I'm going to say it again. Know your topic terminology. Bills are representative of broader topic areas. Think like an extemp. Know the lingo of the topic that the locals or industry experts would use, right? Know them, know its context, and then it'll help you so far. David asked the question, is saying Senator A started the blank on blank, let's end it, redundant? Yeah, I would say I hear this a lot, but sometimes you got to say that just to like get moving on the argument. Again, this is like what I'm saying before. I'm not saying to not use these things, but I am saying to reduce your usage of them by a considerable margin or find more precise and more interesting alternatives. That way you do not sound like everybody else. So to give me an example, if you're saying Senator A started debate with this on this, let's end it. You could say Senator A has really pushed this narrative on X topic. I really want to put this argument to bed. That's a more unique and more nuanced way of saying what you were trying to say right there. Make sense? Any questions? Excellent. Fifth, how to improve your language choice in round on the long term. So when you're on break, like now, or for my guys who don't really got that much money to be going on a world tour of tournaments all across the country, every major and all that stuff, and you're borrowing on a budget a little bit, and you have a little bit more spare time, how can you become better wordsmiths with your word choice? Well, it's all about expanding your cultural lexicon and formal vocabulary beyond your environment. As some dude named Ken talking to an uncultured Canadian once said, you know I got language barriers. There's no accent you can sell me, okay? Basically meaning people have different ways, again, like I talked about, of communicating and different words that they say in their different regions and locales. And so just saying something a little bit prettier is not going to help you all the time, right? You need to spice it up a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, I try to be culturally relevant for you guys. You know what I'm saying? So here's a 4-point play to this better wordplay, right? First, read. I'm serious. You guys need to read more. Read different literature that exposes you to perspectives that you are not used to. And this could also this could also attribute to like the fourth thing I'm going to talk about. But I would say read different books. Like seriously, like read books. And if you think like, oh, he's just saying this just to say this, like he doesn't read. I got books. I have a whole library right there. I read. And that is what helps me be able to have more compelling language and be able to put it in ways that helps my kids when in their speeches, right? So read, man. I'm telling you, there's no substitute to reading someone's thoughts and perspectives, and that really helps you out, right? Second, respectfully explore lingo of different parts of the country. Don't be a culture vulture like Drake. Learn different ways different parts of the country and the world say different greetings and customs and how they describe the same scenarios you experience in your everyday life. That will then give you a wide range of being able to talk to different people because you understand their lingo very well. And so if you get someone from a Minnesota, or you get someone from a New York, or you get someone from Massachusetts where they say wicked smart like Lisa Adams did in finals, you can be able to possibly say that lingo in a joke, and then you're like, oh, when you put it that way, that was funny, and I get the argument now, right? Like the way people say certain things in New York is wildly different than the way people in Boston say different things versus how people in Texas say different things. And you can even break it down in Texas to more regional. People in Austin talk different to how people in Houston talk. Trust me, I know. So that helps you along the way, right? Third, understand how certain complicated and more precise words are used in each context. I've talked about this before earlier in the lecture. Let's keep going on this again. Y'all be hearing a lot of real cool big words that people have used in their rounds before, and you think and you look it up on Google and you think, I'm good, I understand the definition now. Nice try. That's not how this game works. Find it used in sentences and articles. Let's go back to reading. And articles that understand the context in which the words are used in better ways. That way it gives you a better understanding of how to pronounce those words and use it correctly. I even found at times where I say a certain word and then like the people around me are like, Joe, what the heck does that mean? And I'm just like, oh, my bad. It means this. And then it's used in this kind of context. And they're like, oh, so I'm like, oh, I got to use it in a better context. And so that if you understand the context in which that word is used, you're better able to talk about it in everyday, in more common language, right, at times. And so this goes into the fourth and final thing, which is talk and watch stuff with your parents, because, you know, family matters. But even when you master more precise and uncommon language, it won't matter if your mom and pops don't understand, right? So practice using that more precise language in front of your parents. Trust me, they're not going to judge you, I promise. And if they do, they're your parent, they're allowed to. Use that language in and around more common words so you can get the hang of it and get the feel of your words, so much to the point where once your parents start understanding what you're saying, you're in a good position here. Because again, think of it in the game. In the game of Congress, congressional debate, you're going to be mostly in front of parents, especially as you go to more bigger tournaments that, guess what, have more people from different parts of the country come to that tournament, and therefore you're going to be exposed to judges with different and varying perspectives, especially ones that are judging because, you know, they want to be there for their kids or their team is forcing them to judge. Right? So that should be and also I want to make this very clear. This is not a model, a strict model for you to follow. These are more like guidelines, principles, and tenets that I just think are super useful and will help you to be able to master these kinds of skills, but do them in your own individual ways that will really help you, right? Because I'm very big on intentionality and also individuality. There are different ways to skin a cat. Everybody can do things in their own way, but I believe there are certain principles in which you do achieve your own individuality in this event. Sixth and finally, how to execute when you got the right words to use. Now we have really taken on all these things. How do we then execute in the right way and put it all together? Well, I believe, again, there are 5 tenets to fantastic speaking when you now have the right words at your disposal. First, technique takes time. The more nuanced or precise the word is, the more time you should take articulating the word in order for the word to land really well. You guys try to go too fast on big words and then it comes as contrived, conveyed, or the judge just doesn't understand because they didn't hear you, or it leads into a fluency break and now the judge doesn't believe that you're credible. Right? Take your time, land the word well. I'd rather you land the word well than the judge understand exactly what you said, especially if you're using a very precise word. Second, emote the right emotion. Each major or distinctive word you say usually has an emotion most people associate with the word. You should make sure your emotions match those words. This should not be an issue, especially if you did your research when you were improving in the long term. Meaning, at the end of the day, you should not be smiling when talking or using language that is giving very sad and communicating a very sad and unfortunate reality. Like, you should not smile and like talk about like issues that are triggering, like self-harm in any way. Like, just don't. Like, that seems pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised. Third, have balance, like I talked about before. You don't want your speech to be too common and casual, but also you don't want it to be too technical and too precise and uncommon, that it goes over your judges' heads. Work on mixing and matching depending upon the speech and depending on the, again, narrative and emotion you're trying to evoke in the speech. Fourth, play your position. I've talked about this in previous lectures I've given. Oh, that reminds me, I have to get the lecture slides. So like, I can put up my narrative lecture. Watch my narrative lecture when it eventually gets on YouTube. It will help you understand this more too. Player's position though. Don't overcomplicate your role in the round. As in, don't try to do too much if you're giving the early speech. Don't try to do too much if you're trying to give the late speech. Don't try to do too much if you're giving a mid-round speech. Just do your job in terms of delivering the right kind of arguments for when you speak in that round. That then makes it easier for you to perform your more precise and slightly uncommon or precise and common words and phrases, because it gives you just that little bit more room for error where you can be a little bit more, experiment just a little bit more. Fifth and finally, trust yourself. You guys are super intelligent. You guys are super smart. And I know you guys are really working hard to do well at these tournaments. As long as you do the work and the research, trust that you have the capacity to make it happen and trust the preparation you did. Once you have the confidence in yourself and the speech is flowing, you are well on your way. And to put this all into perspective of how this could really sound well, here is I'll play a little bit of a speech from the 2018 NSDA Senate champion Luke Talitsky in his 2019, and one of the speeches from his 2019 Senate performance.
When the printing press was invented in 1440, it resulted in an unprecedented expansion of self-expression. Consequently, codifying the principle of free speech into law became necessary. We stand on a similar precipice in history. As the internet revolutionizes privacy, we must legislate with a similarly responsive paradigm that consumers, too, deserve data privacy protections. Principally, pass this legislation to level the playing field between tech giants and average Americans. Now, in the status quo, the relationship between the two is wildly coercive. Why? Well, tech companies know that you have to use their product in order to stay relevant, both socially and economically, meaning they can make their privacy policies as exploitative as they want to. If you don't consent to their policy, you don't get to use their platform. But this bill tears down that firewall between tech companies and users. Because in order for companies to meet the standard of affirmative opt-in as described in the most relevant section 1B, they have to let users use the platform without giving up the data. 1B does far more than Mr. Asif's lack of nuance's explanation. Otherwise, it's considered forced consent because a coercive choice is no choice at all. This isn't just theory. The Guardian shows in May of 2018 that the EU passed a very similar law requiring affirmative opt-in consent. And what happened? Companies like Facebook and Google were forced to change their take it or leave it privacy policies. So Senator Glickson, we actually solved the problem you asked Senator Braun about in questioning. But this is far more nefarious than me just getting targeted cat videos on my Facebook. Corporations are profiting off your identity, exploiting your personhood for their gain. You have no choice but to check their box. This bill changes that. And
I'll just pause it there. But yeah, hopefully that gives a really good explanation on everything that I really talked about in this lecture, especially because I'm sure you can hear how, especially in the intro, very precise, very articulate in his delivery of the language. Then there were parts of the speech where he was being a little bit more casual and common, like when he was describing, this is not just targeted cat videos that I get on Facebook. That was a way to be more relatable and be more casual and common with the round, but in a precise way because he used a precise example, right? Hopefully that gives a better understanding of the idea that I'm really trying to harp on for you guys in this lecture.
when the printing press...
And therefore, we are done. Time for questions. And finally, if you have any questions, comments, points of clarification, want to have a deeper discussion on this, or want me to review your speeches to see how you can improve your language in more specific ways, please contact me on email or hit me up on Instagram at Things for Nigeria. That is it.